Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Mama Bird's house, and I am Robin. If you're new, today we are finally getting to the project of canning up some bone broth or stock, and this is just early morning prep for me to get that started. I've got some water and bones in this crock pot, and in the white crock pot there to the left is the leftover bones from the short ribs that we made the other day. These bones were just some of the bones from the half a cow that I purchased. Here is some vegetable scraps that I've thrown in the freezer. You're looking at some carrot peels and some parsley stems. There's probably some celery. Here's an orange. This orange had seen better days, so I chucked it in the freezer thinking that would be a nice citrus addition. And these are just leftover veggies that otherwise would have gone into the trash. So going into the crock pot, a handful of garlic into the one. We've got enough goodies in the other one with the barbecued ribs. And I'm just adding some salt and pepper. And I mean, you can really add whatever you like into these at this point. I'm also adding a splash of vinegar. I find it helps break down the bones and gives it a rich flavor. So we're gonna put the lids on here and let them go pretty much as long as we can at this point. Here we are with the two stocks. So I've got both the slow cookers going. This is the one that we cooked the ribs in for dinner when we went to the lake. And so it definitely looks a little bit more brown, but there's things in there like soy sauce and barbecue sauce and stuff from the ribs. So there's a little bit more going on in that pot. This is the stock, more stock one. It's getting steamy. So you can see that the actual liquid's a bit clearer, which is really nice, but it's definitely breaking down pretty quickly. So this has been going for about 5 hours now. It's about 2:15 in the afternoon. So, and it's smoking hot today. So this was like the worst day ever to do this because it's just like radiating heat. I figured I would turn you around if I'm going to talk to you, but so the slow cookers are quite warm, so didn't pick the best day to do this, but they were in my fridge defrosting and I needed to deal with them. So here we are. I am going to end up canning up that stock and the broth. I'm calling one broth and one stock because one is a little bit more neutral and the other one's a little bit more heavy. So I don't know which is which, but that's what's happening. And I'll eventually end up pressure canning the stock into pint or 500 ml jars so that we can use it for future. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to film that because I just did a pressure canning video, but we'll see. I just wanted to give you an update though, so you could see that I was actually doing this. I do have another canning project on the go right now. I'm in the process of doing cherries, but I put that on hold today because it's just too hot in my kitchen and yeah, it's super muggy and gross here. So I'm going to do nothing on the stove or the oven. I have no idea what I'm going to do for dinner yet. We might just do like a cold pasta salad. So I might throw on some water, make some noodles, and just do a cold pasta salad with some chicken that I can. So it's not a heavy dinner because it's just too hot. And yeah, anyway, that's where we're at. So we did decide to film the pressure canning steps in this video, but I wanted to actually show you what I did with the broth beforehand. So these two pots, the one with the lid in the back and then this large one here, have been in my fridge for a couple of hours after I made this stock. I cooled it down and put it in these pots, put it in the fridge, and what happens then is the fat from the product that's in the slow cooker, it solidifies at the top of your broth or your stock. So you can see they slip right off of the actual liquid that we want to put into the jars. This is just fat. Some people would call this tallow. In my opinion, the one in this pot would be considered tallow, but it's really broth fat. So tallow is a little bit more pure than what this is. So call it what you will. It is a cooking fat. You can use it to cook items in or fry food, but it just comes right off if you cool the liquid down. So that's what we're doing in this step. In that smaller pot behind is the fat from the pot with the lid. That is the one with the barbecued ribs in it. I'm going to show it to you. You can see it's a titch of a different color, and that's just because was barbecue sauce and all kinds of different things in it. So the stock from that one is quite a bit more solid. You can see how gelatinous it is in this shot here, but we're going to bring these up to temperature. Not a rolling boil, but a boil. You want it to bubble. You want it to be hot liquid. And then we're going to put it into the jars, and I'm going to show you that full process. For this fat, we will actually heat this up, and I'm going to show you first how we deal with this fat. So I'm actually going to grab a couple of lids for the fat while we deal with the other stock. Keeping a lid on something is super important in my house right now because we have tons of flies. It is just that season, and so keeping things covered is super important. Here is the fat that's a little bit more pure and a little bit more genuine to a tallow. It's beautiful, and this is actually real time of it melting down. It doesn't take very long. I think the total amount of time was 2 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that to actually reduce the fat back to a liquid. So it happens very, very quickly. Obviously, it's going to happen even faster if you have smaller chunks of fat, but it happens very quickly. So make sure that you're monitoring it and stirring it, standing over the stove. Here is almost done. I'm probably going to turn off the heat at this point so that the residual heat from the pot will actually melt the last few bits of the tallow. It's actually happening so quickly there. So the next step after you've got it at this complete liquid stage is to put it into the fridge. And the way that I do that is I take a stainless steel bowl with some water. I'm going to mix that water into the actual fat. Stir it as I'm mixing it, and then put all of the mixture back into the stainless steel bowl. So here's the water going into the fat, mixing, and then we're going to put everything in that pot back into the bowl. And what this is going to do, it is going to separate as best as you can, really, the fat from any additional liquid that could be in the fat itself. So this is the other batch that I'm doing. So another bowl full of water and mixing into the fat, and then we're putting into the bowl. These two bowls are going to go into the fridge. It's going to cool down, and then later on in this video, I will show you how I remove the water from the fat again. And this step that I'm doing right here can be done multiple times to remove any sort of impurities or anything that you don't want in your fat. So now we're moving back to the broth. I've brought out both of them from the fridge. This is a new day. And we are going to heat the broth up, and then we are going to put it into jars and pressure can it in the electric pressure canner you see on the counter behind. This is the Presto digital pressure canner. It is an electric pressure canner. It is great. And it comes with this manual that gives you the instructions and the timing for most of your canning projects. It's a very straightforward manual. There's not a whole lot of actual recipe information, but timing is definitely a huge factor when it comes to pressure canning and water bath canning. So I'm setting the timer, hitting play. I've put my jars in the canner. They're going to heat up to temperature. You want hot liquid, hot jars into hot liquid. So everything needs to be hot and bubbly. I'm just getting everything ready for the actual canning process, finding more rings and setting a few towels down for the hot jars to go onto my glass top, because this doubles as a countertop for me. I'm gonna get some lids, some brand new lids out in some warm water, not boiling water. I don't boil my lids, but I am gonna put them into some hot water just to loosen up the bands or the ring, the orange squishy bit underneath the lids. I just find that it helps a little bit when it comes to getting a good seal on my jars. So as we're just going through the canning process here, we're waiting for our broth to heat up, we're waiting for our jars to heat up, and I just wanted to actually call out one thing, and that is that my preference for jar selection when you're canning is a wide mouth jar. And the reason behind that is for cleaning purposes. It is a pain to get my hand into a regular mouth jar, so I am having to use these brushes and scrubbers and things like that just seem to be a pain in the butt. So if I could recommend anything, it would be to get the wide mouth jars. Spend the extra few dollars on the jars, and it just makes clean up a whole lot easier. So the jars are now warmed. They're pretty hot at this point, so I'm just dumping out the excess water and putting them onto the stove here on the rag, and getting those ready to actually put the hot broth into. Once all of the jars are out of the canner, I just double check the inside of the canner. There is a mark on the inside that indicates where your water level needs to be. So just having a quick look here, making sure. It was actually tricky to find once it's under the water. There's a little bit of a learning curve there, but making sure that the water level is at the right height for pressure canning. And then once that's set, I'm ready to start loading the broth into the jars. So we ended up getting 2 full jars of this sort of, I'm calling it a chili base. I think I'm going to use it for beans or potentially a Mexican dish or something like that once I go to use it. And then we get 4 jars of the regular broth. Here's one of the most important steps, is cleaning the rims of your jar. I just use a bit of vinegar and a paper towel to clean them, especially when you're working with fat or sugar, anything like a jam or jelly that has a high sugar content or fat. It's highly recommended to make sure you wipe down your jars. It's a great way to double check there are no issues on your jars, because chips definitely happen, and I've had to sub out a jar here and there every once in a while. So we're putting on the lids and the bands fingertip tight. If you watched my previous video with the cherries, I believe, fingertip tight. If you use your thumb and index finger, just those 2 fingers to tighten the jars, pretty much as tight as you can. That is the measure of fingertip tight. So that is a trick that I learned. You'll see I'll put it in front of you and just use my middle finger and my thumb to tighten the jar. In they go. They're super hot. Just checking. Sorry, the camera is not at a great angle here, so you can't see really what I'm doing, but I'm checking the lid of my pressure canner to make sure that the seal is on there right, locking it up, and putting on the regulator or the gauge to vent, and then hitting play, and the canner does the rest. So this is the rest of the stock. There's probably 1 more pint left in there, but I'm just going to grab a large jar, that I have clean and empty on the side of my counter there. We're just going to fill this jar with what is left and pop it into the fridge once it's cooled. And I'm just going to use this over the next couple of days rather than actually pressure canning it. We probably could have fit this 1 more jar into the pressure canner, but I don't like to stretch it that far. So this will get used up this week at some point in time. Once it cools down, I'm just going to throw it in the fridge and it will be fantastic. You're going to see that I changed my mind, and I'm not going to use the plastic on the hot jar, but I don't have another ring kicking around, so I actually ended up stealing this one off of my sugar canister that I leave on my counter. just until it cools, and I'll probably switch it out for that plastic one, but at least it will have a lid. So we've got one row on the right of the 2 jars of the chili base, and then the 5 jars, not 4 jars, of the regular stock. You can see them bubbling away here. They're still smoking hot, and they are full of that white film due to my hard water. As you can see, I did not put vinegar in the canister again, so we'll have to clean these up once we're done. So it's the next day, and this is the fat from the fridge. This is the one that's more from like the plain sort of broth that we made, and this is the one that's more like the chili base or the one with the barbecue sauce and all the things. So you can definitely tell the difference in the color, but I'm just going to show you what I do now that this is solidified up in the fridge. So I just pulled it out, literally the bowl's freezing cold, and I have another pot here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push slightly on the edge, and it releases from the water in the bowl. You can see it's coming up. Okay. Now you can see on this side, this is kind of like your impurities or less desirable type of material. This could be salt and pepper. This could be any sort of other herbs or stuff from the stock that we made previously. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of scrape it away with a butter knife. I'm not super worried about this because I'm just going to use this as like a cooking fat for like searing meat and sauteing things at high heat. So I'm not super worried about it. I'm not going to use it for baking or making any sort of body products. So I'm just using it for cooking meat basically. So I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm just scraping this off. And what I'm going to do now that it's relatively clean, is put it back into my pot, melt this down, and it'll only take a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to put this into a jar and it's going to harden in the fridge, and I'll show you what that looks like after we're done. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, and same situation. I'm just going to melt it down, put it into a mason jar, and then we'll use it for cooking. I'm definitely going to do a video on how to render tallow properly for body butters and actually body products in general. But to get rid of this film entirely, you need to do this step multiple times. So scrape the impurities off, render it down again in the pot, add your water, put it back in the fridge. Then do this step again, and then do this step again. So it's a multi-step situation, and I didn't have very much, like you can see, like there's only, a couple of small little jam jars at the end of the video. Here's a better look at the actual surface of that chunk of fat there. But this wasn't a lot, so I just took the easy way out, scraped it off, and rendered it down only one other time. You can definitely do it multiple times, and to however your preference is and to how you like it. But I'm going to go into more detail of that once we do all of the fat in the fall. In the time that I was able to wash a couple of jars, these are super clean. I just washed them out with some soap and water. We're almost completely melted. I'm just going to break it up just a little bit. Some of these chunks are a little larger, so it's taking a little bit longer, but they're almost completely melted. about the same. Based on how much I got in this jar, I actually just opted to get another smaller jar for the rest of it instead of going with the larger 500 ml jars. So this one is nice and clean now. And we're gonna put this one in here. See how there's a dent there? This is not something I would use to can product with, but in this application, it's totally okay. We're just gonna close these up with some used lids and rings and put them in the fridge. I'm gonna leave them on the counter for a few minutes so they can cool down just a little bit because they are smoking hot. And then once they cool down a little bit and I can actually touch the jar, then I'll put them in the fridge so that they can finish cooling down and setting properly. So here's a quick look at the beef fat after it's cooled. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you got some information out of this video. Thanks for sticking around. It actually took me a few days to film this one, so it is spread over a few days in the life. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something, and I was able to help you with something that you may have been struggling while you were making your own stock or broth or whatever you want to call it. The cooking fat, I'm super excited about. This won't last too long, but I'm really excited to dig into my freezer and pull out the tallow that I got from purchasing half a cow and rendering that down. But that is something that I've decided is going to be on the docket come fall, potentially even winter, because it is just too hot in my house, and where we live, it's not realistic to have AC because for the stretch of couple of weeks that we do get this super hot weather for us, it's just not worth it to have that AC. So we do have some fans running, and we stay in the shade and we stay cool and go to the lake as much as we can. So we are trying to stay cool as much as we can, but once fall hits, it'll be chilly. So that will be when we really get into doing more projects with canning and beef fat or tallow. I really want to try out making some body butters and soap. So I've never done it before. I've never made soap, and I've never rendered this much tallow. So we're going to do it together for the very first time, and I'm really excited about it. And yeah, hopefully stick around and stay tuned for that. Please consider subscribing, and we'll catch you in the next one.